This is a case from the latter decades of the 19th century. Sweden remained a largely rural country in both structure and daily practice. Most of the population depended upon agriculture for subsistence, living as laborers, smallholders, or tenant farmers on modest plots of land, with work governed by the seasonal demands of planting, harvest, and the care of livestock. Debt was common and continuity of routine mattered more than accumulation. The local church and parish authorities held an established role in supervising community life. Their influence extended beyond religious observance to matters of conduct and order. Behavior was measured according to religious standards, and the household was regarded as the primary place in which such standards were to be maintained within the family. Obedience to authority, accepted hierarchy, and sexual propriety were expected and enforced as part of ordinary social discipline. Within this broader national context lay the parish of Ungern, situated in the province of Skåne along the southern coast. The area consisted of individual farmsteads set at some distance from one another, each with its own dwelling, outbuildings, and adjoining fields. These holdings were linked by narrow unpaved roads, used chiefly for local travel and the movement of farm goods. Daily activity followed the agricultural calendar, with work governed by planting, harvesting, and the care of livestock, and with little variation from season to season. Life in the parish followed predictable patterns. Work in the fields, attendance at church, and limited interaction beyond the immediate locality. Beneath this outward order, there existed a quieter and less visible layer of tension that in communities of this kind, people often struggled to distinguish between what was necessary for survival and what was considered proper behavior. Rumors spread easily, but neighbors were generally unwilling to interfere in matters occurring within another household. Situations that carried the risk of public scandal were therefore more often dealt with through silence, rather than be reporting them to authorities, so long as everyday life in the parish appeared undisturbed. Anna Mansdotter, aged 47, was born in the year 1841 in a rural district near Kristianstad. Her upbringing followed the customary conditions of the agricultural poor, shaped by farm labor and periods of domestic service in which opportunities were limited and advancement depended largely upon endurance and conformity. In due course she married Niels Nielsen, a man approximately 13 years her senior, and removed with him to a small holding at Ungern. The marriage provided a modest degree of stability, though the household remained burdened by debt and exposed to the continuing uncertainties of subsistence farming. In the year 1862, Anna Mansdotter gave birth to a son, Per Nielsen, then other children born. Of the marriage survived infancy, and he alone reached maturity. The family's circumstances did not materially improve, and labor on the holding required the contribution of all members. Authority within the household rested chiefly with Mrs. Nielsen, whose management of domestic and agricultural matters became more pronounced as her husband's health declined. In 1883, Niels Nielsen died of pulmonary disease. His death left Anna Mansdotter a widow responsible for the farm and dependent upon her son for its continued operation. From that point onward, the household consisted solely of mother and son living and working in close association. The arrangement, while not uncommon in rural districts, placed considerable weight upon their mutual dependence. External oversight was limited, and the rhythms of daily life were largely concealed from view beyond the immediate vicinity. In the years that followed, rumors circulated within the parish regarding a relationship between Anna Mansdotter and her son, but no formal investigation was undertaken. By the middle of the decade, these reports raised concern about the household's standing within the community and led to a change in domestic arrangement. In the year 1887, Anna Mansdotter arranged for Per Nielsen to marry Hanna Johan's daughter, the daughter of the district judge Jan Olenoff Bresserp. Following the marriage, Hanna Jens' daughter removed to the farm at Ungern, took up residence within the household. From the beginning of the marriage, The way the household functioned did not match its outward appearance. Control of the farm and of daily life remained with Anna Mansdotter. She directed work, handled financial matters, and determined how the household operated, and her authority was not questioned. Hanna Ewens occupied a lower position within the home, carrying out domestic duties under close supervision and with little independence. The household was therefore organized around a fixed hierarchy that allowed little change. In the months that followed, this arrangement was reflected in written correspondence. Anna Mansdotter wrote several letters to her parents describing her life at the farm and the difficulties she experienced within the household. She referred to constant supervision, the lack of authority within her marriage, and an environment in which decisions were controlled by others. The letters did not describe any specific act, but they recorded an ongoing conflict that showed no sign of resolution. The letters mattered because Anna Mansdotter was not an ordinary private individual. She was the daughter of a local official, and her written complaints created the possibility that others outside the household might become aware of conditions at the farm. Such attention would have placed the family's reputation at risk within the parish. Even so, the domestic arrangement did not change. Anna Mansdotter continued to live at Inure, and the daily work of the farm went on without interruption. No outward sign of conflict was visible the community. The letters continued to be written, and the situation remained unresolved as the household entered the spring of the year 1889, that on the 28th day of March in the year 1889, routine activity took place at the farm in Inure. Work connected with the holding was carried out within the dwelling in adjoining buildings, and no visitor was observed arriving from outside the immediate area. Anna Mansdotter was present in the house during the day and attended to ordinary domestic duties. She was not seen leaving the premises, and no arrangement was made for her to go elsewhere. Per Nielsen was engaged in customary farm labor, while Anna Mansdotter remained occupied with household supervision. During the afternoon hours of the 28th day of March in the year 1889, that attention was drawn to the house at Una following an absence of expected movement within the household. When Anna Mansdotter did not appear for her customary duties, inquiries were made within the dwelling. Initial efforts to locate her in the principal rooms of the house proved unsuccessful. Shortly thereafter, examination extended to the stairway leading down to the cellar at the foot of the steps. The figure of Anna Mansdotter was observed lying motionless. Her position suggested a fall, and the arrangement of the surrounding space was consistent at first glance with an accidental descent. That no immediate disturbance of the upper rooms was noted, and the house itself showed no outward sign of disorder. Neighbors were summoned without delay. Upon their arrival, the position of the deceased was viewed, and it was agreed that further assistance should be sought. In keeping with local custom, the parish priest was called to the house. He attended and confirmed the absence of life, offering no opinion beyond that which was customary in such circumstances. The authorities were then notified. Constables arrived and took charge of the premises, directing those present to stand clear. While an initial inspection was conducted, the body was examined where it lay, and the condition of the neck and surrounding area was observed. The arrangement of the cellar, stairway, and the manner in which the body had come to rest were recorded. Following the securing of the premises at Inure, medical officers were summoned to conduct a formal examination. Upon inspection of the remains of Anna Mansdotter, they observed injuries to the neck inconsistent with a fall upon the cellar steps. The distribution and character of the marks led to the conclusion that death had resulted from compression of the throat, producing asphyxia. No injuries sufficient to account for death by accident were identified, and the position of the body was judged to have been arranged after life had ceased. These findings were entered into the record and communicated to the authorities. Attention then turned to the immediate members of the household. Anna Mansdotter and Per Nielsen were questioned separately regarding the events of the preceding day. Their initial accounts were brief and confined to routine matters of farm work and domestic arrangement. When pressed upon the circumstances of Anna Mansdotter's absence and the discovery of the body, Per Nielsen stated that One was responsible for his wife's death. He asserted that his mother had taken no part in the act and should bear no blame. This declaration was recorded and formed the basis of the first stage of the inquiry. Further questioning revealed material inconsistencies between the statements given and the medical findings. P. Nielsen maintained that he alone had caused the death of his wife and asserted that his mother bore no responsibility. This account was not consistent with the nature of the injuries observed, which medical opinion indicated could not readily be explained by his description of events. When these discrepancies were put to Anna Mans, she provided a separate statement. She admitted to having taken hold of Anna Mansdotter's neck and applying pressure while asserting that her actions were undertaken in order to assist her son. In her account, P. Nielsen was said to have struck the deceased, but not to have caused death by strangulation. The two accounts did not agree as to the distribution of acts. That P. Nielsen's statement placed the whole responsibility upon himself and excluded his mother from participation. Anna Mansdotter's statement, by contrast, admitted pressure applied to the neck while assigning to her son only the earlier blows. Although the particulars differed, both statements had the effect of reducing the other's share of responsibility. In view of these contradictions, and having regard to the medical conclusion as to the cause of death, the authorities proceeded on the footing that both parties had taken part in the acts that produced the death, and the case was treated as one of joint involvement. As the investigation continued, additional material was introduced. In light of this admission, the authorities considered the position of Anna Mansdotter within the household. That it was concluded that her presence and a possibility that she might discover or disclose the relationship represented a disruption to the existing domestic arrangement. On that basis, the death was treated as having been caused in order to preserve that arrangement and prevent his exposure. Proceedings were initiated before Villains Heredret, the district court exercising jurisdiction in the Kristiansand of the province of Skåne. Later in the year 1889, at trial, the medical officers restated their conclusions as to the cause of death. The confessions obtained during examination were read into the record and the correspondence of the deceased was produced before the court. Witnesses from the parish gave evidence concerning the general reputation of the household and observations made following the discovery of the body. The defense advanced no alternative account sufficient to displace the combined weight of medical testimony and admission. Judgment was delivered after consideration of the evidence. Both Anna Mansdotter and Per Nielsen were found guilty of murder, and the additional offense incest was entered upon the record that in accordance with the law then in force. Sentences of death by beheading were pronounced upon each of the accused. With the verdict and sentence entered, the proceedings were formally concluded, and the case passed from judicial inquiry into the stage of appeal and petition. In the period following the pronouncement of judgment, the case did not subside into silence, but entered a wider public sphere. Reports of the proceedings circulated beyond the parish of Inger and were taken up by newspapers across the country. Accounts of the evidence, the admissions made during examination, and the nature of the offenses were reproduced at length, often accompanied by commentary upon the social conditions from which the case had arisen. The matter was treated not merely as a local crime, but as an occurrence bearing upon broader questions of order and propriety. Within this coverage, divergent interpretations emerged. Some commentators regarded the verdicts as a necessary assertion of law in the face of conduct that violated both statute and moral convention. They emphasized the medical findings, the confessions, and the prolonged concealment of illicit relations, presenting the outcome as the inevitable consequence of established facts. In these accounts, particular attention was given to the authority exercised within the household and to the role of Anna Mansdotter as its central figure. Other writers adopted a more qualified tone, while not disputing the occurrence of the death or the existence of forbidden relations. They questioned the distribution of responsibility between mother and son. Per Nielen was frequently described as having lived under prolonged influence and direction with limited independence of action. Editorials of this kind suggested that his initial confession, in which he assumed sole blame, reflected a pattern of obedience rather than a clear statement of individual culpability. The reduction of his sentence during later proceedings was cited as support for this view. Discussion also extended to the application of capital punishment. The sentence imposed upon Anna Mansdotter was examined in light of contemporary movements toward penal reform. Observers noted that executions had become increasingly rare and that public sentiment was divided as to their continued necessity. The circumstances of the case involving a woman and offenses committed within the household intensified this debate and placed the proceedings within an ongoing national conversation regarding punishment and restraint. As these differing assessments appeared in print, no single interpretation displaced the others. The official record remained unchanged, yet public understanding of the case was shaped by the manner in which evidence and circumstance were selected and presented. In this way, the aftermath of the trial was marked less by resolution than by the coexistence of competing views, each grounded in the same established facts, but leading to different conclusions about responsibility and justice. In the early months of the year 1890, petitions were submitted seeking mitigation of the sentences imposed in the case. These applications were examined by the competent authorities in accordance with established procedure. Upon review, the sentence pronounced upon Per Nielsen was commuted to imprisonment for life with hard labor on the ground that his conduct had been shaped by prolonged dependence and direction within the household. The sentence imposed upon Anna Mansdotter was allowed to stand. On the 7th day of August in the year 1890, the sentence of death was carried into effect at the prison in Kvarnstar. The execution was conducted in the customary manner of the period and at the appointed hour. Official records note that death was pronounced without delay and that the requirements of the judgment were satisfied. With this act, Anna Mansdotter became the last woman to be executed under Swedish law. P. Nelson was removed to custody to serve the commuted sentence. He remained imprisoned for more than 2 decades and was released in the year 1913. Following his release, he lived quietly and without recorded public notice. He died in the year 1918 from pulmonary disease, the same condition that had earlier claimed the life of his father. No document from his later years referred directly to the events at Ingjer. In the years that followed, the farm at Ingjer changed occupants. Its buildings continued in agricultural use, and no public marker distinguished the site from others of similar character. In the district, within official archives, the case appeared thereafter only in summaries of notable prosecutions and in discussions concerning the decline and eventual abolition of capital punishment, which was completed in Sweden in the early decades of the 20th century. The record admits no further development, no new evidence was entered, and no renewed inquiry was undertaken. With the sentences carried into effect and the appellate process exhausted, the case was closed in accordance with the judgments of the court. Thereafter, it remained preserved only in the written record without amendment or addition.